Welcome to Mr. Hutchings' History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
All right, let's dive in. This time we're tackling the civil rights movement and specifically this lecture you gave us by Mr. Hutchings.
Okay, great.
It's all about, the legacies of those giants, King, Malcolm X, and that whole rise of Black power.
Yeah,
Ready to dig into some history.
absolutely. I think what's fascinating is how these figures, although they had their differences,
Oh, yeah.
they all contributed to this, massive shift in American society. It's like different approaches to the same problem really shows how complex the fight for equality can be.
You hit the nail on the head. And one thing that really jumped out at me from the lecture was how King decided to strategically shift his focus
Yeah.
from the South to the North. It's kind of ironic when you think about it. After all those victories against segregation in the South, overturning Jim Crow and everything,
Right.
he goes up north and bam, runs straight into de facto segregation.
Exactly. And that's why his Chicago campaign in '66 is so important. See, in the North, it wasn't about fighting laws that were outright racist like in the South.
Yeah.
It was more about confronting the deeper, almost hidden racism baked into housing, jobs,
Oh, I see.
and even just basic opportunities. Like, think about redlining. That practice kept Black families stuck in neighborhoods that were, starved of resources.
It's like he went from battling a monster you could see to fighting, I don't know, a ghost or something.
Yeah, much harder to pin down.
Way harder to dismantle. And the lecture mentioned how King couldn't fully solve the ghetto problem, which is,
Yeah.
it speaks volumes about how tough it was for the entire civil rights movement to really tackle these issues, the deep-rooted ones.
Absolutely. And you can't forget the historical context. For some segments of white society, integration meant sharing power and resources.
Oh, for sure.
And they weren't always on board with that. It definitely held the movement back.
In 66, that year was like a turning point. The Meredith March, it started as a voter registration thing,
Right,
and then suddenly, boom, Stokely Carmichael drops that Black Power call on everyone.
He was electrifying, a total game changer. Carmichael's declaration was like this raw frustration with how slow things were moving.
Yeah.
Really different from King's whole integration approach. It sparked a ton of debate within the movement itself.
Wow, a real crossroads, huh? The lecturer even said that King was worried about alienating white allies with this new, bolder message. But it also made it clear that Black power wasn't just one thing.
Of course, it had different meanings for different people. For
Mhm.
some, it was about self-defense, the right to protect themselves against violence,
Totally.
while for others, it was more about reclaiming their identity,
Yeah.
building self-reliance, celebrating their culture and heritage, basically saying, we're strong, we're proud, and we deserve recognition.
And that brings us to, well, someone who embodied that whole self-determination thing, Malcolm X.
Right.
Mr. Hutchings really highlighted how different his story was from King's, almost like they came from different planets.
Oh, definitely. Malcolm X's childhood was marked by poverty, run-ins with the law, and that shaped his radical perspective. He saw racism as like this thread woven right into America's fabric, and he felt it needed a much stronger response than King's nonviolent approach.
And being part of the Nation of Islam early on, that definitely influenced his views on self-defense and Black separatism. You can really hear that defiance in his speeches.
For sure. His message hit home, especially in those northern ghettos where King's tactics, but they didn't seem to be enough. Imagine facing police brutality every day, struggling with poverty. Nonviolence might not have felt like the answer to that immediate crisis.
Right, right. But then something amazing happens. Malcolm X makes that pilgrimage to Mecca in 64.
Right.
And everything changes. I mean, he still fought for Black autonomy, but the lecture mentioned how his views kind of softened,
Yeah.
became more open to working with others.
That transformation is crucial to understanding his legacy, Malcolm X is still a controversial figure, but his impact on Black power can't be denied.
Mm-hmm.
He challenged the way things were, forced people to rethink how to achieve racial justice, and even though his life was cut short, he planted seeds that continued to grow long after he was gone.
And speaking of legacies,
Yeah.
it's incredible how his journey to Mecca had such a profound impact on him. Like, the lecture even said that some scholars believe it exposed him to a more, a more inclusive side of Islam, which led him to question those strict rules of the Nation of Islam. Makes you wonder how his message might have evolved, had he lived.
Yeah.
What new alliances would he have formed? What new strategies would he have used?
It's a question that keeps historians up at night.
Uh-huh.
But speaking of different viewpoints, I thought it was really useful how Mr. Hutchings presented all those different historical interpretations of both the civil rights and Black Power movements. It's like looking at the same thing through different colored glasses.
Right. I totally agree. It reminded me of how historians like Claiborne Carson, the King Scholar, he argues that the civil rights movement was this multi-layered struggle, not just one approach.
Exactly. And then you have Manning Marable, the Malcolm X biographer.
Right.
He stresses understanding Black Power through the lens of Black nationalism.
It's so important to consider all these different views because it shows us that history isn't a straight line, It's complicated, messy, full of debates and disagreements.
Exactly. It's not about finding the right interpretation, but understanding how each viewpoint adds to the bigger picture.
Makes it richer, more nuanced. And, we can't ignore the impact of the Cold War on all of this.
Yeah.
The lecture mentioned how the government, with all their worries about communism, often saw Black Power groups as a danger, a national security threat.
Right.
Leading to all that surveillance and suppression, like the FBI's COINTELPRO program.
It's a dark reminder of how politics can twist and manipulate social movements.
Yeah.
And then you have those social historians who go it all down to the everyday people.
Right.
The folks who are fighting for change in their own neighborhoods.
They remind us that movements aren't just about the big names. They're powered by regular people, those unsung heroes, organizing protests, registering voters, fighting for fairness right on the ground.
Exactly. Think about all the women, too often left out of the story, who played huge roles in both movements. Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, Angela Davis.
Wow. Yeah.
All phenomenal organizers and leaders.
Their stories really show the strength of grassroots action and how crucial it is to recognize everyone's contributions, even those who aren't in the headlines.
Absolutely. And speaking of putting Black Power into action, we can't forget the Black Panther Party.
Oh, yeah.
Founded in '66 by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, they truly embodied those ideals of self-reliance and community empowerment.
The Panthers, man, they were a force, tackling issues on so many fronts. Their armed patrols to watch the police, that was controversial. But it came from that real threat of police brutality that plagued Black communities.
Absolutely. And you can't overlook their commitment to uplifting the community. Those free breakfast programs for kids.
Yeah.
The health clinics, the education initiatives. It's amazing.
It's like they were taking care of their people's immediate needs while also pushing for bigger change. They didn't wait around, they just took charge and created solutions.
Exactly. And they did it all while promoting Black pride, challenging those harmful stereotypes that had been used to put Black people down for so long.
But being so bold, so unapologetic, made them a target. The FBI's COINTELPRO program really went after them, using all these dirty tricks to disrupt and smear them.
It's crazy to think how far the government went to silence those who dared to challenge the system. But even with all that, facing internal conflict and constant opposition, the Black Power movement left a mark.
Absolutely. You can see it in the surge of Black pride and cultural awareness,
Right.
the creation of Black studies programs at universities, and that continued fight for racial justice today, addressing the systemic inequality and police brutality that still exists.
Makes you think, did Black Power actually divide the civil rights movement, or did it make its message stronger? By pushing it to confront these deeper issues that were sometimes ignored in the pursuit of legal equality.
That's a powerful question. It highlights how dynamic social movements are. There's rarely just one way to do things, and progress often comes from a mix of strategies, even ones that clash.
For sure. And that brings us back to King, Malcolm X, and Black Power. What's interesting is how their legacies are all connected. They all moved the fight for racial justice forward, each in their own way.
Like Mr. Hutchings was saying, their stories show us there are many paths toward equality.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not about picking just one, but recognizing the value of each, finding ways to bridge the gaps between them in our own time.
You know, it's interesting. Some scholars, like Peniel Joseph, argue that we're seeing a resurgence of Black Power ideas in today's social justice movements. Think about Black Lives Matter, for example, with their focus on Black self-determination and challenging systemic racism and police brutality.
It's like echoes of the past, showing up in the present, reminding us that this fight for racial justice, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Each generation picks up the torch and carries it forward.
Exactly. It really gets you thinking about how those historical movements are shaping the conversations we're having today.
And it leads us to that last question Mr. Hutchings asked, the one that's been stuck in my head. He asked, what do you think is the most effective way to deal with systemic racism and inequality today? It's a question that makes us go beyond just learning about history and think about how we can use those lessons to make a better future.
It's a powerful question.
Hmm.
It forces us to look at those uncomfortable truths about society and ask ourselves, what am I doing to perpetuate these systems of oppression? Or to dismantle them?
And there's no easy answer, but maybe that's the point. Maybe it's about realizing there are many ways to approach it, each with its own strengths and weaknesses, and finding ways to bring them together.
Yeah, it's like there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. And just like back then, there are so many approaches people are talking about today. Some folks are all about pushing for policy changes,
Yeah.
legislative reform, tackling those inequalities in things like housing, education, the criminal justice system.
All right, legislative reform.
Others are focused on boosting economic power, like supporting Black-owned businesses, investing in those communities,
Yeah,
creating paths to build wealth.
absolutely. Economic empowerment is key.
And then you have those who are all about changing the culture, fighting stereotypes, making sure Black folks are represented positively in media, in pop culture,
Yeah.
helping people understand and appreciate Black history and culture better.
Yeah, changing the narrative.
It's like we're weaving a tapestry, right?
Yeah,
Of all,
yeah.
all these different threads, each one a different approach, a different strategy, a different way of seeing things.
It's a beautiful image. The strength of that tapestry comes from how those threads connect.
Exactly. It's not about picking one over the others, but recognizing that each one has value and figuring out how to weave them together to build a stronger movement for change.
I like that.
And you know what else struck me from the lecture? The part about how Black studies programs got started in universities. That was huge, not just for academia, but for how we view and value Black knowledge and perspectives.
Yeah, that was a direct outcome of the Black Power movement's push for self-determination.
Right.
It was about acknowledging that Black history and culture, they're essential parts of American history and culture, not just some separate thing. And that change has had a ripple effect, not just in research and scholarship, but for all those students who've now been exposed to these different stories, these different ways of thinking.
And it's fascinating to see how these historical movements are shaping the debates about social justice happening today. Like, think about the whole defund the police idea.
Yeah, interesting.
It gained a lot of attention recently, and it echoes some of what Black Power activists were demanding decades ago, like community control over the police, making sure law enforcement answers to the people they're supposed to protect.
You're right. Those demands didn't come out of nowhere. They were a direct response to the police brutality and harassment that Black communities have faced for generations.
Right.
The same experiences that fueled Malcolm X's call for self-defense and the Black Panthers' armed patrols.
It's like history doesn't just repeat itself, it rhymes. The issues we're struggling with today, they have deep roots in the past. And if we want real lasting solutions, understanding that history is key.
Couldn't agree more. It's about making those connections, seeing those patterns, and recognizing how past struggles shape the challenges we face now.
Yeah.
And it's also about understanding that progress isn't always a straight line. There will be setbacks, detours, moments of frustration, and even despair.
But along the way, there will also be those victories, those moments of unity, moments that remind us of how powerful collective action can be, how resilient people are. And those moments, they deserve to be celebrated, held on to fuel us and keep us moving forward.
They are the fuel that keeps hope alive.
Yeah.
They remind us that change is possible even when things seem impossible.
Right.
But it takes more than just watching from the sidelines. We have to participate. We have to be willing to question how things are, to be open to different viewpoints, even if they challenge us.
And I think that's where Mr. Hutchings' last question really hits home. It's not just about understanding history. It's about what we do with that knowledge in the present.
Exactly.
It's about asking ourselves, how can I turn this knowledge into action? How can I make a difference in my own community?
It's about realizing that the fight for social justice isn't something you watch. It's something you do. It means showing up, being present, putting in the work, even when it's tough, even when it's inconvenient, even when it feels like you're not changing anything.
Because even the small things, those little acts of kindness, of courage, of just being there for someone, they can ripple out.
True.
They can spark something in others, create momentum, and help build a larger movement.
And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about progress. We're all learning, all growing. The important thing is that we're moving in the right direction, toward a society that's more just and fair, and that we're doing it together.
Like King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Powerful.
We're all connected, and we all benefit from creating a world where everyone has a chance to thrive, to reach their full potential, to live with dignity and respect.
Well said.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the legacies of King, Malcolm X, and Black Power, let's hold on to that hope, that belief, that change is possible, and that commitment to taking action.
Let's honor their legacies, not just by remembering their words, but by living their values, by carrying that torch of justice forward, and by working together to create a future where equality isn't just a dream, but a reality.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about taking those lessons and making them real in our lives.
Exactly. And, it's about remembering that it wasn't just about these big names like we talked about. These movements were powered by everyday folks, people working for change in their own communities.
Yeah, the grassroots efforts. So important.
It reminds me of something else from the lecture about those different interpretations of Black Power. It wasn't a single unified thing.
Right.
It had different threads, goals, tactics. Even within those threads, there were disagreements, debates. It's important to remember that complexity. There's no one right way to approach these issues.
Absolutely. And we see that even today with all the different approaches people are talking about.
Yeah, like some folks are pushing for policy changes, legislative reform
Yeah.
to address inequalities in housing, education, the criminal justice system.
Right. Tackling those systemic issues.
Then you have others who are focused on economic empowerment, supporting Black-owned businesses, investing in those communities, creating ways for people to build wealth.
Economic empowerment is crucial for sure.
And then there are those who are really emphasizing cultural change, fighting stereotypes, pushing for positive representations of Black people in media and pop culture, helping people understand and appreciate Black history and culture.
It's about changing the narrative, shifting those perceptions.
It's like we're weaving a tapestry, right? All these different threads, each one representing a different approach, a different strategy, a different way of seeing things.
It's a powerful image. And the strength of that tapestry comes from how those threads connect and work together.
Exactly. It's not about choosing one approach over the others. It's about recognizing the value of each and figuring out how to weave them together to create a stronger, more effective movement for change.
It's about collaboration, finding common ground.
And, one of the things that really stuck with me from the lecture was that whole discussion about Black studies programs in universities.
Oh, yeah.
That was a huge shift, not just in academia, but in how we as a society value and understand Black knowledge and perspectives.
Absolutely. That was a direct result of the Black Power movement's emphasis on self-determination, recognizing that Black history and culture are essential parts of American history and culture, not something separate or less important.
Right, an integral part of the story.
And that shift has had such a lasting impact, not just on scholarship and research, but on generations of students who have been exposed to these different narratives, these different ways of understanding the world.
And it makes you think about how these historical movements we've been talking about inform the discussions we're having today about social justice. Like, take the whole defund the police idea. It's been getting a lot of attention lately, and it echoes some of the demands that Black Power activists were making decades ago, community control of police, accountability to the communities they serve.
Absolutely. Those demands weren't random. They were rooted in the very real experiences of police brutality and harassment that Black communities have faced for generations. The same experiences that fueled Malcolm X's message of self-defense and the Black Panthers' armed patrols.
It's like history doesn't just repeat, it rhymes.
I like that. It rhymes.
The issues we're grappling with today, they have deep roots in the past. And if we truly want solutions that work, solutions that last, understanding that historical context is essential.
It's about connecting the dots, seeing those patterns, recognizing how past struggles inform the challenges we face in the present.
Right. And we also have to remember that progress isn't always a straight line. There will be setbacks, detours, moments of frustration and disappointment. But through it all, there will also be moments of triumph.
Right.
Moments of unity, moments that remind us of the power of collective action and the resilience of the human spirit. And those moments, they're important to celebrate, to hold on to as fuel, to keep pushing us forward.
It's true. Those moments of victory, they nourish our hope. They remind us that change is possible, even when the odds seem stacked against us.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that we have to be active in this fight. We can't just be spectators. We have to be willing to question things, to be open to different ideas, even when they make us uncomfortable.
It's about stepping outside our comfort zones, engaging with those who hold different views. That's how we grow, how we learn.
And that brings us back to Mr. Hutchings' last question, that powerful question that challenges us to think about how we can make a difference.
Yeah, that question really stayed with me.
It's not enough to just understand the past. We have to use that knowledge to create change in the present. To ask ourselves, how can I take what I've learned and turn it into action? How can I be a force for good in my own community?
It's about personal responsibility, recognizing that we all have a role to play in creating a more just and equitable world.
And remembering that even small acts of kindness, courage, and compassion can make a difference. They can inspire others, create ripples of change that spread far and wide.
Absolutely. It's not about being perfect. It's about making progress. We're all on a journey of growth and understanding.
It's about moving in the right direction.
Exactly. Toward a society that is more just, more equitable, and doing it together, supporting each other along the way.
Like King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We're all connected. We all benefit from a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, to reach their full potential, to live with dignity and respect. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the legacies of King, Malcolm X, and Black Power, let's hold on to that hope, that belief that change is possible, and that commitment to taking action. Let's honor their legacies by not just remembering their words, but by living their values, by carrying that torch of justice forward, and by working together to build a future where equality isn't just an aspiration, but a reality. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings' History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.